Okay, in this video we will cover Chapter 16, the lymphatic system and immunity. Now the lymphatic system is a large network of vessels that help circulate fluids throughout the body, and is also very closely related with the cardiovascular system. That's why the lymphatic system is almost always covered just after the cardiovascular system. And it works with the cardiovascular system to help maintain blood volume. Alright, the lymphatic system has three main functions. The first one, to maintain fluid balance. This helps move excess fluid away from the interstitial spaces, the spaces in between the organs itself. Number two, lipid absorption, to help transport fat into the bloodstream. And lastly, and more importantly, defense, helps the body to defend against diseases. Alright, lymphatic capillaries. These will originate in the interstitial space of most tissues. Just as in the regular blood capillaries, they're only one cell thick. And once the interstitial fluid enters the lymphatic capillaries, only then can it be called lymph. So once that fluid enters the lymphatic capillaries, from then on it's considered to be lymph fluid. Alright, here's a illustration taken from the book. The red being arterioles, the blue being the veins, the venules where they meet are the capillaries, and the structures in this green are the lymphatic capillaries. So once that fluid in the interstitial space all over here enters here, now it's called lymph. Lymphatic vessels, and these are going to be similar to veins, but actually a little bit thinner than veins. And just like with the regular blood, or the veins themselves, some veins have valves in them to prevent backflow of blood. It's the same thing here with lymphatic vessels. Some of those will have valves to prevent the backflow of lymph. As the lymphatic vessels get a little bit larger, they will lead to more specialized tissues called lymph nodes. Then the vessels will merge into something larger called the lymphatic trunks. Okay. And these lymphatic trunks will lead into what are called collecting ducts. And there are only two collecting ducts in the body: the right lymphatic duct and the thoracic duct. Right, here's a general image of the lymphatic system itself. The green are the lymphatic vessels, and these round, grape-like looking things are the lymph nodes. And of course, a variety of the various trunks: the lumbar trunk, intestinal trunk, subclavian, and so on. Now, of the two collecting ducts, the thoracic is by far the larger of the two. It drains most of the lymph from the body. The right lymphatic duct will only drain lymph from the right side of the face, the neck, upper chest, and about half of the arm. And here's how this looks. This area that's in this red is the area that drains the lymph from or into the right lymphatic duct. So right hand side of the face, the neck, chest, just below the diaphragm, upper part of the abdomen, and about half the arm. Everything else in the body will drain into the thoracic duct. Alright, we'll talk about the flow of lymph. And this is really due to the activity of muscles to help kind of push the lymph through the lymphatic vessels into the collecting ducts, into the collecting ducts. So you have the action of skeletal muscles, the respiratory movements. So whenever you inhale and exhale, the movement of the chest muscles and abdominal muscles helps to move the lymph along, and also some smooth muscle that's found in some of the larger lymphatic vessels. The lymph nodes, or the lymph glands, as sometimes they're called, are located throughout the lymphatic pathways. Within these nodes, you'll find the lymphocytes and macrophages that will help fight invading pathogens. And they are shaped kind of like a bean, and they're about 2.5 centimeters long. There's a good image of one in the lab manual and in the textbook that we'll cover. This first term here, we'll talk about the structure of the lymph node, is something that's not particular just for the lymph nodes. It's something that you'll find in multiple organs, like the kidney, like in the lungs, what's called the hilum. The hilum is a term given to any indented area where you have blood vessels and nerves entering a structure. So you will see the hilum again a few more times in this course. The capsule is the layer of connective tissue that will enclose the node, and it will help to divide the node into sections called the lymph follicles or the lymph nodules. Either term is correct, but I like to call them the lymph nodules. And when you see them on a slide, they kind of look like thumbprints, kind of scattered throughout the structure. And the last term on here, the lymph sinuses. These are the spaces within the node itself where the lymph will circulate. So the entire inner space is the lymph sinus. All right, here's an illustration of one. These round things look kind of like thumbprints, or the nodules. You have the lymph flowing in here, then being circulated throughout here, and then going out. Again, here's the hilum, the indented area where you have the vessels and nerves entering here. The outermost portion is the capsule, and its whole entire inner space where the lymph kind of sloshes around and circulates. That's the sinus. Again, there's the image of lymphatic system with some lymph nodes that are named. The cervical lymph node near the base of the neck, thoracic, axillary under the armpit, inguinal, pelvic, and so on. The functions of the lymph node, there are two primary functions. The first one is to filter harmful products from the lymph, to get rid of them as soon as you can, and to monitor body fluids that's provided by macrophages and lymphocytes. Okay. Along with the red bone marrow, the lymph nodes are production sites of lymphocytes. Alright, next, we'll talk about two of the lymphatic organs, the spleen and the thymus. We'll start with the thymus. And both of these two organs have functions that are very similar to a lymph node. So you can almost think of them as being just really, really big lymph nodes. Something we talked about in the first chapter of this course, the thymus. The thymus is going to be much larger when you're an infant, and after you hit puberty, it will start to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And when you're an adult, especially when you're about middle-aged, it's almost all gone. It's replaced by adipose or fat tissue in the space where it used to be. The thymus will make proteins, or not proteins, make hormones called thymosins. This will help the T lymphocytes, or the T cells, help them mature. And these are what are very important in your immune system. So T for T cells, T for thymus. Here's an illustration of how relatively large the thymus is when you're a fetus. Then as you're an adult, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And this empty space here, like I mentioned, it gets replaced with adipose tissue. Here's how an image of the thymus looks, a very small section. Alright, next we'll move on to the spleen. This is the largest lymphatic organ that we have in the body. But one big key difference between this and other structures in the system, the sinuses are filled with blood, not lymph. That's a key difference. Within the spleen, you'll find two different types of tissue, red pulp and white pulp. The white pulp is filled with lymphocytes, and the red pulp has lymphocytes, macrophages, and red blood cells. So know that white and red pulp are found only in the spleen, not the thymus. Here's a small section of the spleen, a cross section. I got the nodules here, and look like big thumbprints. The nodules are where you find the white pulp, and the space in between it, the tissues in between it, are the red pulp. Alright, next we'll move into the body defenses against infection. First, the formal definition for a pathogen. This is anything that causes disease. This could be a virus, it could be a bacteria, it could be a fungal spore. Anything that causes a disease is considered a pathogen. The body can prevent entry of these pathogens or kill them, but two different types of defense mechanisms, either the innate defenses or the adaptive defenses. For the innate defenses, these are very general defenses that protect against a large variety of pathogens. Compare that to the adaptive defenses, which are much more specific and precise and will target very particular antigens. And these are carried out by lymphocytes. So the innate responses or innate defenses are much more quickly, much faster in response, but they're much more generic also. And adaptive defenses take longer to develop, but are much more precise. So each of them have their role. Some examples of the innate defenses. The first ones, the mechanical barriers. These include your skin and the mucous membranes, like inside of your mouth and your eyes and your nose and so on. These will prevent pathogens from getting into your body. If they can't get into your body, they can't make you sick. So this is your first line of defense, the mechanical barriers. Next one, the NK cells, or natural killer cells. These are a specialized type of lymphocyte that will secrete a protein called perforin. It actually will perforate or poke holes into the a pathogen and will help break it apart and kill it. That's what the NK cells do. Phagocytosis. When tissue gets damaged, it will release chemicals that will help attract white blood cells like neutrophils and monocytes that, when they get there, will ingest and destroy, phagocytize the foreign particles there. And last one, fever. Many bacterial infections or viral infections will cause lymphocytes to release chemicals that will raise body temperature. And phagocytotic cells, like neutrophils, like monocytes, are much more aggressive when the body's temperature is higher. So a fever is always a good indicator that there's an infection somewhere. Alright, move on to the adaptive defenses. First, the formal definition for immunity. The resistance to particular pathogens or to their toxins or to their byproducts. Now the key for all this is to be able to distinguish, is this antigen or is this molecule, is it foreign and needs to be killed, or it's part of you and it's okay and leave it alone. The definition for antigen is any foreign molecule that will cause an immune response. And the larger the antigen, the larger the response from the body. And be careful not to confuse antigen with antibody. Antibodies will help kill antigens. So that's what this term actually means. An antigen will generate antibodies. So antigens will elicit an immune response. So antigens make you sick, antibodies get rid of those that make you sick. So, alright, we'll talk about lymphocyte origins. Like all blood cells, lymphocytes will originate in the red bone marrow, but some of those will stick around in their bone marrow to mature, but some will move on to the thymus to mature. The lymphocytes that move on to the thymus and mature are called T cells, or T lymphocytes. And those that stick around in the bone marrow are called B lymphocytes, or B cells. So T cells, thymus, B for bone marrow. That's how you keep those straight. And of all those cells, all the lymphocytes, about 75% are T cells, and the other quarter, the other 25% are B cells. All right, here's a graphic from the book that puts all that together. Red bone marrow of a typical long bone. Some to move on to the thymus to mature, T cells, and they mature when they're exposed to thymosins. And the ones that hang out in the bone marrow are B cells. Alright, next we'll talk about the two different types of responses, one involving the T cells, one involving the B cells. And they are different in how they operate, so you need to be very careful not to confuse either one. For the first one, the cellular immune response, a lymphocyte must be activated before it can respond to an antigen. It has to be told what it needs to go after or what it needs to kill. So what happens is a cell, like a macrophage, will engulf the antigen, and as it breaks it apart and kills it, it will stick a piece of the antigen on its surface, like a flag sticking out. It's called an antigen-presenting cell. It's as a notification to the rest of the immune system, here's what you need to look for, here's what you need to hunt down, here's what you got to kill. So these lymphocytes won't be activated until they know what they need to go after. So macrophages that do this, they are presenting the antigen to the body. That's why they're called antigen-presenting cells. Alright, once that antigen is presented to the rest of the body, it will interact with a complex series of proteins called the MHC, Major Histocompatibility Complex. And it's this series of proteins that helps determine, is an antigen a part of you and it's okay and don't mess with it, or is it foreign and it needs to be killed. So this is what is very key for matching tissue types when an organ is transplanted. If the body sees a new organ as something foreign, it will attack it and shut it down, and the transplant won't be effective. So that's why blood matching is vital. That's why tissue matching is vital. All right, and this last point is in red and in bold for a very particular reason. You need to keep this response clear from the other response, which we'll talk about next. In the cellular immune response, the T cells act directly with the antigen-presenting cells. The T cells do the actual killing. They do the dirty work. That's not the same in the next response type. So for cellular immune response, the T cells act directly with the antigen-presenting cells. All right, there are various types of T cells. You have the helper T cell, which will help to activate B cells into making antibodies. We'll talk about those in a second. Next, you have the killer T cells, or the cytotoxic T cells. The two separate terms mean the same thing. These will combine with antigens and produce perforin to poke holes in them and then to kill them. These have the exact same function as natural killer cells, but cytotoxic T cells are much more specific, much more particular for what they go after. And the last one on here, the memory T cells. These are what help provide for future immunity if you get exposed to that disease later on. So that's why if you've had measles as a kid, if you're exposed to that disease as an adult, that's why you don't get it. The memory T cells keep a record basically of what all your body has fought as an immune system. So it can mobilize quickly and kill it off quickly before it sinks in and you get sick. So that's what the memory cells do. All right, in this picture, these cells here are the killer T cells, the cytotoxic Ts, and they're going after a cancer cell. So they're injecting perforin to basically rip apart this cancer cell. All right, now we'll move on to the B cells and the humoral immune response. B cells are activated by the helper T cells that we just mentioned. Once those B cells are activated, some will turn into memory cells, so they can keep track of what your body has been exposed to, just like the memory T cells. But others will turn into what are called plasma cells. These plasma cells are the ones that produce antibodies. From here, these antibodies go on and attack through multiple methods that we won't get into here. They will attack the antigens and help to kill them. So that's why this point is in red. In the humoral immune response, the antibodies do the dirty work. The B cells do not. So for the cellular response, the T cells directly kill the antigen. For humoral response, the B cells don't. They don't get their hands dirty. They make antibodies. Those antibodies do the killing. So there's a big difference here. All right, here are images of plasma cells, and they're secreting antibodies all throughout here. And here, the blue are the plasma cells, and they're producing these antibodies here. All right, while we're talking about antibodies, we'll talk about the various types and their basic shape. A typical antibody has a capital Y shape to it, and they have 4 chains of amino acids together. The 2 smaller chains are the light chains. They are identical to each other, and the longer parts of the Y, the heavy chains, are also identical to each other. There are 5 different classes of antibodies, and they differ in their heavy chains. And I'll show you those shapes and their differences here next. All right, typical capital Y shape. The longer parts are the heavy chains. They're identical to each other. And then the prong, I guess you'd call it the prong parts of the Y. The parts stick out. The smaller parts, they're the light chains. They're identical to each other. And it's these ends here where the antibody will attach to the antigen. All right, here are the 5 different classes of antibodies, and each one will respond to a different type of infection. So you have IgG, and the IG stands for immunoglobulin. If you remember from when we talked about the chapter on blood, one of the plasma proteins, an example of one of those is the globulin. The formal name for an antibody is a immunoglobulin, because they are a protein within the blood plasma. So for IgG, or immunoglobulin gamma, the heavy chains are pretty straight. IgA, the part kind of juts out here laterally on the bottom. E, they're more rounded here on the bottom here. And IgD, they kind of stick out on both sides. And the biggest IgM, or mega, 5 individual antibodies kind of join together, making one really big antibody. And I won't ask this on a question or on a test. It's for you to see how they are different, both in size and both with their heavy chains. Alright, lastly, for this chapter, we'll cover the different classifications for immunity. The first one we've already talked about, the innate immunity. This is what you are naturally born with, due to genetics. So you can't do anything about this. This is what you're born with. Now, the next 4 terms are very often confused with one another. What we'll do is I'll go over each 4, and I'll give you clues on how to keep them all straight, because they sound very similar and they're not the easiest terms to remember. So, the first one, naturally acquired active immunity. This is just normal exposure to a disease. If you're a kid and the kid next to you has chickenpox and you get chickenpox, you naturally got that disease. That's naturally acquired active immunity. Next one, artificially acquired active immunity, is when you are vaccinated for a disease. Next one, naturally acquired passive immunity. This is a newborn receiving antibodies from the mother's breast milk. So not only is this important for the bonding experience with the mother and a newborn, but it's important to pass on antibodies from mom to the baby. So that's naturally acquired passive immunity. And the last one, artificially acquired passive immunity. This is a direct injection of antibodies. So all 4 of these are often confused. It's very easy to get these backwards. So here are some hints to keep them all straight. When you see the term artificially, like here and here, you are going somewhere and you're injected with something. So you're either injected with a vaccine or you're injected with the antibodies. Naturally is something that happens naturally. That's why it's called naturally. Either through breastfeeding or just being exposed to a disease. So artificially means you're being injected with something. When you see the term active, that means your body is making the antibodies on its own. When you're exposed to a disease, your body makes antibodies to respond to that. So your body is doing the work. When you are being vaccinated, you're being injected with a weakened form of a disease, so your body can make antibodies to fight that disease. Again, when it's active, your body is doing the work. When it's passive, you are receiving the antibodies directly, either from mom and breast milk or being injected with them. So when it's artificial, you're being injected with something. When it's active, your body is doing the work. And when it's passive, you are getting the antibodies directly. And here's a nice little flowchart that puts all that together. Immunity in general, what you're born with, the innate immune system. Everything else is going to be considered acquired. When it's active, your body has to make its own antibodies, either from natural exposure or being injected with a vaccine. And when it's passive, you're getting the ready-made antibodies, either from mom during breast milk or getting injected with the antibodies directly. So make sure that you keep those 4 straight, because they will get asked on a test. Alright, this will conclude the chapter on the immune system and the lymphatic system. And like always, if you have questions, definitely ask me in lab or contact me email or text or on the discussion board.